Grid live pre-race. We got a big race weekend in Singapore. Max Verstappen on the front row, Lando Norris on the pole. Who could get the win? NASCAR Cup Series now at Bristol, a playoff elimination race. I'm Joe San Diego. With me, we got Isha Azim from Racing with Isha. Mara Piacentino is back to discuss Formula One. A big thank you to our Patreon investors calling the show, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew, for investing in the grid each and every month. Their monthly investments help us stay on the air, get to the racetrack. Of course, you could do a one-time investment through Buy Me a Coffee and YouTube Super Chat. Mara, Isha, let's get started with the Singapore Grand Prix weekend is here. One of the most intense race weekends because this racetrack, it's always hot. It's humid. It's very technical. It's very bumpy. It's a street course. So you have the walls right there, some big curbs. And this race tends to go very long, up to that 2-hour full distance. The drivers, very physical on them. And this could have not been a better time for the teams, except Red Bull, because they struggled at this track last year. However, first practice, Perez was faster than Max Verstappen. Second practice, Verstappen was the fastest. We get into qualifying, Lando Norris on the pole. Max Verstappen's right there. You got to look at their teammates, Oscar Piastri in 5th, and Sergio Perez missed out on Q3. He is 13th. Now, of course, we know Carlos Sainz got a lot of damage, potential grid penalty, so that's going to shuffle the back half of the grid from the 11th place on back. But Isha, starting with you, does Red Bull have any hope of closing the gap on McLaren this weekend?
If we're talking about just this weekend, I don't think so. I think that there is a possibility that Max could win against Norris, but if we're looking at the overall points that Red Bull and McLaren would leave after making this weekend, I think McLaren's still going to be on top because McLaren has two exceptional drivers who are scoring points for them pretty consistently each race, whereas Red Bull really is only relying on Max Verstappen to bring in the points. And even Max hasn't been performing as well as we're used to him seeing. And if we're looking at Checo, Checo's had a tough season so far. He has had some very poor performances, some pretty average performances, and so I just don't think that that Red Bull has really good chances of closing the gap on McLaren. I think that McLaren's still going to leave this race weekend on top.
Well, technically, no, unless they bring some winning updates in the next races. We must also consider that not only Newey left the team, but also other engineers. So it will be unlikely to close the gap to McLaren. But contrary to what Isha said, I think that Red Bull has still a better driver than McLaren. A driver that can create the magic lap in qualifying or a great race management rather than the McLaren drivers.
It's going to be really interesting to see what happens with these two teams battling on the front row. I'm hopeful we see those two fighting for the win. Strategy, track position. I don't want to see those two get caught up in a crash on the opening laps or something. I think that would be very anticlimactic, where if we get a good race, this could just lead up to a suspenseful Singapore Grand Prix. And we got to talk about how suspenseful this season has turned out. We've gone from a year where Red Bull pretty much won every race except this one last year. This year, it looked like it was going to be the same thing. Max Verstappen, people were making the memes of hearing the Dutch national anthem over and over and over. But that has not been the case. Red Bull, as you mentioned, Mara, they're losing Adrian Newey. Sergio Perez on the hot seat. He is just not delivering. It looked like he could last race weekend. Crashes out on the last lap. Verstappen, that's the one constant. We know he's going to be in Red Bull next year. Mara, is Red Bull in a crisis mode? And do you believe Max Verstappen may have committed to Red Bull too early, considering there was rumors of him switching teams to Mercedes?
Well, I think it's too early to say that they are in a crisis mode. I would wait and see how they behave in the next tracks, which are more conservative and might work better for the Red Bull car. I don't think that Verstappen commit to Red Bull too early. I mean, just consider 2 months ago, every driver in the paddock would have wanted to drive the car, so no one could know it.
Yeah, I sort of agree with Mara here too. I don't think that Red Bull are in crisis mode yet. but they are definitely worried probably because McLaren's already first in the constructor standings, but by the end of the season, they do have some chances of being able to get close or potentially surpassing it. I think it does depend a lot on Checo's performances as well. And as far as the topic of Verstappen committing to Red Bull too early, I don't think so at all. Because if you look at the last 2 seasons he's had with Red Bull, especially last year, any driver who's in that position would obviously commit to that team. And as Mara pointed out, even a few months ago, a lot of the drivers would have done anything to be in that Red Bull seat. So I don't think that Verstappen's committed too early. I think it really matters how the rest of the season plays out. And if anything, this season could just be one of those, off years that a team has, and then next season, I feel like they could potentially rebound.
A rebound is all it takes. A better designed car. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens for Ferrari. Qualifying effort was not exactly that great. Leclerc's lap time was deleted. Carlos Sainz, of course, crashed out. Cold tires caught him by surprise as he was starting his hot lap. That treacherous final corner where last year we saw Lance Stroll had that hard hit, claimed him, and there was a couple times some other drivers I thought, oh, they're going into that barrier, but they managed to hold off, not hit that barrier. Ferrari, they are 51 points away from the constructor leads, and of course, 29 behind Red Bull, so it is very close between those three. Singapore, though, got a bit of a break before we go to Circuits of America and start the final 6 races of the F1 season. Isha, is McLaren and Red Bull outscores Ferrari in Singapore? So if that is the case, do you believe Ferrari has enough time to catch up and contend the Constructors' Championship with 6 races remaining?
I would like to be optimistic and say yes, but I don't see that being the case. I think that McLaren has a great car this season, and Red Bull we know has Max Verstappen. So if they outscore Ferrari in Singapore, I think that they're just going to. I just don't think it's going to be possible for Ferrari to catch up to the lead. If anything, maybe they'll switch places with second place, and Ferrari might end the season in second place. But I don't think that they're going to be able to score enough points for the remainder of the races to come into first. I just don't see that happening.
Yeah, totally agree. Well, first of all, I never thought that they could really be a contender for the Constructors' Championship. You need to do better than win a couple of races and to be considered a threat. You need to prove that your car and your drivers can be competitive in the majority of the tracks. Ferrari is having too many ups and downs, and they are doing mistakes that must be avoided to be considered a contender.
Interesting to see what happens. Music's back. It's been a while. Let's do a lightning round. Isha, starting with you. Williams is starting 11th and 12th in this race. Do you believe one or both of the drivers will score points?
I'd like to say both because I'm enjoying watching Colapinto so far, but I'm going to go with one driver scoring points.
Daniel Ricciardo, rumored to be his last race with Visa Cash App Racing Bulls, such a long name. Mara, do you believe that is true or false? Daniel Ricciardo is on the hot seat.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm hoping that it's false, but based on what I've read and heard so far, it seems like it's very true.
Now, ever since 2011, every race in Singapore has had at least one safety car or a virtual safety car. Isha, starting with you, does that trend continue this year?
I think so, 100%. I mean, we already saw Carlos crashing today. I think that tomorrow during the race, when drivers are, going in it, I think that's definitely going to happen.
Yeah.
Kevin Magnussen, he is back. 0 penalty points. He started outside the top 10. His teammate Nico Rosberg is in the top 10. Had a good qualifying effort. Mara, starting with you. Do you believe Kevin Magnussen can score points this race weekend?
Yeah, I agree with Mara. I don't think so.
I'm gonna make it math. I think now as well. And the last question. Esteban Ocon outqualified Pierre Gasly. Overall, Isha, do you think Ocon will be able to finish ahead of Gasly in this race?
I don't know. Maybe he will, maybe he won't, but I don't think I can say for certain.
Yeah, again, I don't know as well. I mean, it's too far in a track where overtaking will be too hard. So
Way too hard. It'll be interesting to see what happens. Let's talk about Mercedes. They've been a little bit quiet, but qualifying, they made some good noise. They're in the second row with Lewis Hamilton, George Russell, third and fourth. As mentioned, this is a hard track to pass. Now, we know McLaren, sometimes when it comes to strategy, they're not exactly the best. What happened to Hungary? What happened to Silverstone? Red Bull, I would say the leg up when it comes to strategy, but their car is just Max Verstappen is not happy with Sergio Perez all over the place. So, Isha, do you believe this weekend Mercedes has a car better than Red Bull? The strategy game is better than McLaren. Do you think they're the better team this weekend? Potentially grab that win?
Ooh, this is a difficult question. It's a good question, but it's hard to answer. We know that McLaren has messed up their strategies in the past. They've made some pretty big mistakes with it. And we also know that Red Bull is not the best car on the grid right now. I think that if we're looking at just this race weekend, I think that Mercedes does have a better car than Red Bull. And I think that they could potentially have better strategies than McLaren as well. But I don't know if that's going to lead to them being able to steal the win because ahead of them is both Lando Norris and Max Verstappen. So I think that's more difficult to answer. But I think that they have a better car this weekend and possibly better strategies.
yeah, totally agree with Isha. In general, I don't think that they have a better car than Red Bull. Their car is probably very difficult to drive. It looks to me that it gives its best all in particular conditions. They have demonstrated, though, that they can play better with strategies than what McLaren did in the past. But that's probably more a lack of experience in McLaren rather than a plus of Mercedes.
Gonna be really fun to see what happens. Now, I know you both have been on there for a while. We've talked quite a bit about Sergio Perez, many saying he's on the hot seat. And after Singapore, where this is a racetrack, he knows how to get it done. He's been nicknamed the king of the streets. That hasn't been really showing up lately. After Singapore, Circus of America. We got a break. We come to the United States. Then Mexico City, his home country race. All the rumors circulating he's going to be departing Red Bull because Red Bull's going to say, hey, you're not delivering it. You got to go. But now with these rumors of Daniel Ricciardo potentially being out of a seat after this race, potentially Liam Lawson going in that seat, or there could be another surprise. Mara, do you believe Red Bull has created such a mess with the drivers on top of loss of Adrian Newey, and they cost themselves the constructors stand-ins lead? Do you think Red Bull has essentially created this mess for themselves?
Totally. Let's add also the Horner scandal in February. They have never been brilliant then with the drivers' management, and the loss of Adrian Newey shows also the instability that there is in the team right now. So yes, the situation that Red Bull is facing right now, it's just the outcome of their action.
Yes, I totally agree with Mara. I don't have much to add, but this whole season from beginning to end, I think, is just a result of the mistakes that they've made from preseason till now. And as Mara pointed out, there's also the scandal that happened earlier on in the season that I feel like we've completely forgotten about now. But there's just so much that Red Bull has done this season, and it's just like mistake after mistake. And as Mara pointed out, they've never been good at managing their drivers either. And I think that some of the mistakes they've made this season could definitely be haunting them next season as well.
And you both bring up a good point about the Horner scandal. We got to remember, Max Verstappen's dad was really vocal about get rid of Christian Horner, get rid of. That did not happen. Oh man, things could have been a little bit crazy, but it'll be interesting to see how things would have changed differently had things gone the other way. And of course, we'll recap this race tomorrow on Grid Life Wrap Up, which will be following the IMSA race. So it'll be later in the day because, Isha, we know tonight, under the lights, Bristol Motor Speedway, we got a big race tonight.
That's right, Joe. Shifting gears over to NASCAR now, Bristol Motor Speedway and the Base Pro Shop Night Race are once again the final races of the first round of the playoffs. Four drivers will be eliminated from the playoffs tonight, and what's unexpected is that three Joe Gibbs Racing drivers are at risk of elimination. Martin Truex is 14 points below the cut line, Denny Hamlin 12 points, and teammate Ty Gibbs is only 6 points above the cut line. They could miss the playoffs if any of them have early trouble and finish outside the top 20. Now, Joe, is there a path for Joe Gibbs Racing to have all four cars advance to the round of 12?
I just don't see that unless we get a race at Bristol that is so crazy, so unpredictable. But you still are going to need a scenario where Martin Truex Jr. gets a win, gets himself out of the bottom four. You need Denny Hamlin, Ty Gibbs to have stellar days. Denny Hamlin score multiple stage points. You need Ty Gibbs to have a strong run, and you're going to need to have Chase Briscoe, Brad Keselowski, both have bad days. That's only still three drivers. You got to somehow get around William Byron, 25 points above the cut line. Unless he crashes out before the end of stage one and finishes outside the top 30, I just don't see it, Isha. I think Joe Gibbs Racing is entering this race with knowing at least one of their drivers will not be in the next round of the playoffs.
Yep, definitely. Now, I want to ask you, what do you think is going to happen if all three are out after Bristol?
Oh man, if all three are out after Bristol, that would just be, I think, the worst day for Joe Gibbs Racing in this era of the playoffs. I cannot recall a team of Joe Gibbs size four-car team operation having three of their drivers out on the first round. In fact, I'm pretty sure that has not happened. If this happens, this will be a huge letdown, I think, for Joe Gibbs Racing to see Martin Truex Jr. go winless in his final full-time season, because I don't see him getting a win if he's out of the playoffs. I just think that motivation, that team is gone. Denny Hamlin, that penalty is going to be the main reason why he missed out on having those valuable points, putting himself in this position. And I think a lot of people are going to say, Denny Hamlin, the 11th team, you beat yourselves at Atlanta by saying we're going to play super safe, sacrifice the points, and we got caught up in the crash. Watkins Glen, you put yourself in that position after qualifying to be mid-pack, first lap crash, and then another crash. You guys beat yourselves by not doing what you should normally have been doing, racing hard for the win. And Ty Gibbs, I say that's more missed opportunities. Granted, this is only his second year, Isha, so I think Ty Gibbs still has potential to go out there, get a win. He could be a spoiler winner tonight even. We saw him run pretty good. The tire matches is what bit him the last time we were hit at Bristol. But if all three of those drivers are out of the playoffs, this is just something where TRD, I think, is also going to be saying, hey, Joe Gibbs, what happened? We don't want this to happen next year because Toyota will be down to two cars in the playoffs. Christopher Bell and Tyler Reddick, one from each team. This is going to be really, I think, if that happens, I think that would be a huge moment where Joe Gibbs Racing will really be regretting it. Adam says, Martin Truex Jr. getting eliminated tonight at Bristol. I 100% agree. I just don't see Martin Truex Jr. advancing to the next round.
Yes, now, while Joe Gibbs Racing is not looking good entering Bristol, after qualifying, Hendrick Motorsports has to be smiling. The top three starters are all Hendrick Motorsport drivers with Bowman, Larson, and Byron. Chase Elliott is in the top 10, and all four seem fairly safe to advance to the round of 12. Daniel Suarez is the only other Chevy driver in the playoffs, 36 points above the cut line, but he will be starting in 35th place in the race tonight. So, Joe, does Suarez need to be more conservative tonight compared to how he's been in the past Bristol races?
I don't think he needs to be more conservative in this race. If anything, just approach this race like you would do if this was the spring Bristol race earlier in the season, where you don't have to worry about playoff points as much as you do now. The big key is this. I mentioned Denny Hamlin in Atlanta, he thought, I'll play it safe, hang in the back towards the end of the race, but he still got caught up in the crash, a poor finish. In Bristol, you really cannot play it conservatively. The lap times, 15-second lap times, you're going to go a lap down. If you fall a lap down, you're going to rely on the free pass. If a caution comes out, more when a caution comes out. But then you're going to have to worry about, well, does another car go a lap down? Does the caution come out at the right time where pit strategy is going to play a big factor? Dan Suarez, Trackhouse Racing, this is their only car in the playoffs. They cannot just say, let's play it safe. Because everybody remembers the Hail Mary move. That was not Ross Chastain playing safe. That was Ross Chastain knowing, I'm going to be eliminated. I got to do something drastic. Dan Suarez does not need to do anything drastic tonight. He just needs to go out there, put the best foot forward, pick up one position after another position, because I'm convinced that car is probably more set up for the race, not so much qualifying. So if that's the case, he should have a fast car. This is not the Bristol pre-2007 where it was a single groove, so a lot of beating and banging, just pushing the car out of the way. If he can make that top line work, he has a very good shot again, a good finish. He doesn't need to win. Win will be great. Those playoff points will help in that next round. But just get a good finish. Heck, honestly, at 36 points above the cut line, if he gets a stage win, where it's that first stage or second stage, he could point himself in and then divide that third stage, just go for the win and be even more aggressive. So I think for Dan Suarez, do not be conservative. Go out there, run your own race, and if things work out, turn up the volume on the aggression and try to go for the win, because the round of 12 is going to be much harder to advance when it comes to the points.
Yes, definitely. And now looking at some drivers above the cut line, we have 7 drivers who are 30 points or more above the cut line. The top 4 are 40 points or more. And you said that you feel those 4 are safely in the round of 12. So depending on how caution flags and the strategy work out, do they race to earn stage points rather than the win?
I think if you're above that 40-point cut line, depending on how the cautions come out, you can go for the stage points. If there's a late enough caution, you see several drivers are going to make the pit because they want to have that track position at the start of the second stage or the third stage. You stay out and you get enough vehicles, maybe 3 or 4 others. This is such quick lap times here in Bristol. They don't have a whole lot of time to maneuver around 3 or 4 cars. Get those 10 bonus points, get that playoff point. All of a sudden, you go from 40 to 50. You're pretty much in. So then the rest of the race, you can just focus on getting the win, going for it. If you're in that 30-point range, I think you're still very safe to the point where you should have a good race. You shouldn't be in a position where you're going to be struggling, because I feel a lot of the drivers in the top half where they got 30 points or more have demonstrated they're pretty good at Bristol. Overall, I think you're going to see a very competitive race. I don't think there's going to be a lot of cars out. Tires, I know we'll talk a little bit about that. Could be an issue. I think this is just more going to be a race of keeping it clean, surviving the cautions. If you get in trouble, fixing the damage, coming back, keep racing, because I don't think we're going to see a whole lot of DNFs like in some past years here at Bristol.
All right, now let's talk about tire management. We saw that became a big factor last time in Bristol. Drivers have said that they don't know what to expect this weekend. Joe, we know that you're not a crew chief and cannot predict what the tires will do. But what do you expect after last time in Bristol, and which drivers do you think could find themselves up front?
So, like I said, I'm not a crew chief, but if the weather's anything, it's going to be a little bit on the cooler side for the night. Goodyear, I think they don't want to repeat, so I think we're going to see a little less tire fall off, a little less tire wear compared to the springtime. It's just going to come up to what the drivers will do. I hate to say it, I think the first caution is going to be a tire caution, because we're going to see somebody find out the max limit they could push the tire and it's going to blow and you're going to hit the wall. Then I think we're going to see, just like in springtime, okay, drivers are going to start talking a little bit more about tire management, backing it off. When you think of that race at Bristol last time with tire management, Josh Berry, Chris Buescher, Denny Hamlin, those drivers that have a lot of short track experience, especially with late model cars, where they just burn up the tires so quickly, they're going to be up towards the front. Ty Gibbs, he was up towards the front, but he just burned his tires out a little too quickly. He was done for. Kyle Busch, another factor, he has the experience to be up there towards the front. Overall, Christopher Bell, I think he has the upper hand as well too. If he could get a win, that could be something for Joe Gibbs to celebrate if one or more of his cars are out of the playoffs. This is setting up to be, I think, one of the most unpredictable Bristol races. We got this tire situation. You have drivers that are good at Bristol, like Brad Keselowski, Denny Hamlin, Martin Truex Jr. I'll even throw in there Chase Briscoe. He hasn't won here yet. He's just 6 points above the cut line. All those drivers trying to avoid elimination, all those drivers have good records at Bristol. They're all going to be racing hard. I don't anticipate this race to have, well, we've seen in past Bristol races where we see caution after caution cars dropping out. I think we're going to see cars keep running. This car is much more stronger. The multiple grooves, we could have a long green flag run by that third stage. It tends to sometimes happen as that second groove really comes in and the traction compound on the bottom groove starts to wear out a little bit. So those are some of the things I'm anticipating. And like I said, if the tire management becomes an issue, the 6th car, Brad Keselowski, Josh Berry in the 4th car, Denny Hamlin, Ty Gibbs, Kyle Busch, Christopher Bell, those are drivers you're going to be looking at. I'm surprised to not say Kyle Larson. I know Kyle Larson hated what happened the last time Bristol, so I think he's sort of going to be a little bit more on that conservative side. He could still be up towards the front. It's just going to be such an incredible race tonight. Encourage everyone tune in, check it out, because I think we're going to have a lot to talk about by tomorrow.
All right. Thank you, Joe. No, that's all for our NASCAR section. Let's bring Mara in for the segment where we too can score some points.
Yep, time for pick a winner. So this week we have Formula One, NASCAR, and MotoGP. So let's start with Formula One. Isha, who is going to be the winner?
I'm a little bit scared saying this, but I'm going to go with Lando Norris.
Lando Norris, the last driver to win from the pole, so I think that's a good pick. I think I'm going to go with Lewis Hamilton in 3rd. I just think the strategy game from Mercedes is going to pay off.
Hi, my pick was Norris as well. Then 7th place during the race, Formula One, Isha.
I think 7th place is going to go to Carlos Sainz. That's my pick.
I'm going to go with Fernando Alonso for 7th place.
Yeah, I was saying Alonso as well. And then we have NASCAR.
My pick for NASCAR is Kyle Larson.
I think for NASCAR, I'm going to go with, this is a hard one, Christopher Bell.
Bell, right. And at the end, MotoGP.
My pick for MotoGP is Jorge Martin.
Great pick. I think I have to go the same way, Jorge Martin too.
I don't know. I'll go with Marquez.
Ooh. It's going to be really interesting to see how all our picks turn out. And of course, encourage everyone to comment with their picks for pick a winner. I see Adam has Lando Norris for Singapore, Kyle Larson for Bristol, and Pecco Bagnaia for MotoGP. That's going to be very interesting to see how this all turns out. We encourage everyone subscribe to the Grid Network, hit the bell icon, link in the video description to Isha's channel, as well as ways you can invest in the Grid Network, and we'll be on the air tomorrow after the race. For Mara and Isha, I'm Joe. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next time and enjoy the races.